Good evening. I would like to call to order the December 3rd Lake Washington School Board meeting, and welcome to everybody who's here. So first, I'll entertain a motion to approve the December 3rd agenda.
With a motion to modify it to pull the naming up above public comment. Other than that, yes, with that modification, I move approval.
Do I have a second with that modification?
Yes, second.
Okay, so it has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director Liberty that we approve the agenda with the modification of moving the naming of the new middle school to before public comment. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So with that, we will move to our first item of business tonight. So Dr. Staven, will you please introduce our host school this evening, which is great to see. I'm gonna cheat for a second. It's Rockwell. My children both went to Rockwell. So it's great to have you here tonight.
So raise a hand who is here with Rockwell tonight. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you all for coming. We will ask Principal Michael Clark to come up, and I recently had the pleasure of visiting Rockwell and even had Principal Clark present to our district administrators on some cool things that are happening at your school. And so thanks for being here, and we'll hand it over to you.
Breathe in. Xander said it's what we breathe out. Do you know what that is?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide.
You must be down here. The smartboard. It helps us learn like math. You can do adjectives, nouns, verbs.
Got a favorite on your list yet? You've said a lot of them. We're at Rockwell Elementary. Rockwell is our next host school. We're going to have the opportunity to visit with some of our teachers and our students and see what's happening in our classrooms.
We're named after the American illustrator and painter Norman Rockwell. We were constructed in 1981, and the team that named our school wanted to name our school after an American painter and someone who focused on children. And so when you look at Norman Rockwell's work, a little over half of his paintings feature children. We have a very unique mascot, as many Lake Washington schools do. We're the Mighty Beagles. And the reason for that is that Norman Rockwell loved beagles, and they appeared in many of his paintings. So we are the Mighty Rockwell Beagles.
And what's another positive or neutral reaction that we could have?
We have a focus on culturally responsive teaching.
We obviously wouldn't have time for everyone to brainstorm an idea about everything.
This is the second year we've had that focus. So we've engaged in professional learning, rotations to see one another in practice, and we're really trying to move the needle and make sure that we use culture as a strength and a reference point for our kids.
I really appreciate that question.
Well, 60 seconds I know is 1 minute, which is 1/60th of an hour.
Right.
And so then I keep going.
Dreambox is an adaptive math program that they use, and it's a game, but it's different math games that they play that are kind of centered around, it can be focused on different learning targets or different math standards.
So is this related to your math lesson?
It's like, yeah.
So I assign games that they can then play that are focused around there. But it's a lot more fun because it's on the notebooks.
It's a frog. Do you remember his name?
We are an incredibly diverse school. We are an international community. We have families from all around the world. There are over 30 languages spoken every day, and kids need to see themselves reflected in their classroom.
You can help them with writing their reason of why they like their leaf.
We are in Rockwell's outdoor education classroom that was built after receiving an innovation grant last year.
Scientists relied on each other's drawings to gain each other's knowledge.
This is a wonderful space for outdoor lessons, and originally the vision was to have science-related lessons, but it has morphed into an opportunity for classes to have class meetings out here.
Because it's green and a green leaf.
Readers Writers Workshop, the kinders have come out and done some writing practice, and we've done some work where multiple grade levels, big buddy, little buddies, will work together on lessons out here. So it's turned into a well-used space.
Now that we know a little bit more from the video, what would you like to learn about math? Go.
When he was leaving, he was hugging them and giving people hugs.
Big focus is here at Rockwell
Right.
is culturally responsive teaching and SIA, right?
Yeah.
And so how can we get kids engaged and not feel the pressure of I don't know everything, right?
Right.
None of us know everything, so it really brings all these kids in.
The videos don't talk much,
Right.
but it started with him starting like to farm around.
We're doing an empathy challenge. And it really kind of reminds me of how important it is to do this kind of work.
We do culturally responsive teaching lessons around empathy, and it really has positively impacted the culture around our school.
All right, friends, so I did my quick sketch.
Our school is about community, and it's really about building a positive and welcoming community. Oh, I'm getting a... I'm getting a little emotional here because I'm so proud of our team, and I'm so glad that so many members are here tonight. Thank you for that. All right, well, good evening, Superintendent Stavum, President Bleasner, and the board. Thank you so much for having us as your guests. My name is Michael Clark, and I'm proud to be the principal of Norman Rockwell, the home of the Mighty Beagles. And as you heard in the video, we are a diverse and eclectic international community in the heart of Redmond. If I had to describe our community in one word, it would actually be that. Community. We are a school community with one foot planted in history and tradition and another foot planted firmly in the future with an eye toward innovation and ensuring that our students are future ready. I'm excited to send you one day the class of 2031. They're sitting in kindergarten right now. And I also wanted to say one more time, thank you so much to Jane and Siri for joining us. As I mentioned, we're a school community that has deep roots to the broader community, and we get to claim Siri as a Rockwell Mom alumna, so it was fun seeing her connect with her kiddos, previous teachers, so thank you. A little bit about our school. So as you heard in the video, we are a very diverse school. We're a member of the Redmond Learning Community, and our students matriculate forward to Principal Young in Redmond Middle and finally to Principal Todd in Redmond High School, along with choice schools. We serve 574 students in grades K through 5, and I want to point out something that we note in our continuous school improvement plan. There's a reason that I chose that image on the first slide of the PowerPoint. Our diversity is a source of strength, and we take great pride in serving students and families from around the globe. So as you can see from that data array above there, we are a diverse community. Half of our students and our families are people of color. 30 languages spoken in our schools every day in addition to English, and that influences how we serve our kids. So as you heard, we are in our second year of engaging in culturally responsive teaching. Quick example of that, in one of our kindergarten classes, one of our kinder teachers used her professional funds to buy a pattern book in every language spoken in her classroom. She had 16 books, and the kids were so excited to see the book in Hebrew and Portuguese and Romanian. It was a great, we have moments like that all the time. Part of our School of Excellence work, we're working on translating signs and materials into the languages spoken by the families at our school. And as you heard Julian say, we're engaging in work around sheltered instruction observation protocol, which while it's designed for English learners, it's best instructional practice and it's going to help all students. So we work to foster a caring and collaborative community, and we do that by creating intentionality around equity and empathy. Great example of that, Unity Day last week. We've got a wonderful counseling department, right-hand lady, and we did some work around doing a kindness pledge where every student signed their pledge, and we made an art installation about that. We engage our students in social emotional learning across grade levels using Second Step and other curriculum. Again, we focus on empathy. Jane and Siri had the opportunity to see one of those lessons in action. We have a school equity team, and we're actually doing some work with our physical plant, and I want to take just a minute to say thank you to in facilities Director Miller and Associate Director Buck for their leadership and their work around our ADA upgrades. And I want to mention what they did and then what they actually did. So what they did was they updated our parking spaces. They put in a new ramp that went down that's ADA compliant, filled in spots between the sidewalks, and paved a path around our school. Here's what they really did. They made it so that every child I serve can safely navigate all the way around their school, and that matters. We had, speaking of emotional moments, I remember the first day when that work was done, one of my kinders got off the bus who uses a wheelchair, and he kind of looked at me and said, "See ya," and he zipped away on his own for the first time to go to his lineup position. I actually called his mom. That was a great moment. So Forrest and Brian, thank you for your work around that. We really appreciate that, and every student future ready. I'm also proud to share that we are a National PTA School of Excellence. We worked really hard, the administrative, teaching, and PTA teams, to receive that distinction, and we're not going to rest on our laurels. We continue that work, and so the focus this year will continue around translation services, making sure that students and parents know their rights and responsibilities. We also have a focus on technology and innovation, and again, we're one of the first recipients of a Lake Washington Innovation Grant. Our outdoor classroom is used all the time, and our goal is to expand this in the springtime, put in some more planting beds so that we can plant produce to give to a local charity. So thank you, Director Sanchez and her team, for helping us bring that to life. And also, we're one of the first elementary schools to pilot smart boards in every classroom and teaching space. So the lesson you're seeing on the screen there is from a second grade classroom. Ms. Finocchio is in the audience right now. These are students who, a few seconds later, 3 more students came up to the board to use it at the same time, and they're using manipulatives to create a number that has hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s place, and it's been incredible. We're also piloting Dreambox Learning in 1st, 3rd, and 5th grade, and the initial data has been really promising. Just in the first 3 months of use, we've completed 18,000 lessons. And no matter where the student's starting point is, they've made, on average, 44% growth. So essentially, wherever they start, a half a year of growth in 3 months. And on average, our students who use Dreambox have mastered 8 Common Core standards in that time. So looking at our data arrays, first starting with primary, we use dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills, or DIBELS, as our primary tool to monitor growth. And as you can see here, we generally perform in the high 80s and low 90s, which really proud of. Go team. And we use a variety of tools to monitor literacy, growth, and development. So thrice yearly DIBELS testing, Walk Kids assessment in August, Rockwell designed assessment that our kindergarten team came up with to help us with class placement, data protocols from the teams, and we use time in staff meetings to look at data both horizontally and vertically. The younger grades, kindergarten, a focus on phonemes and phonics. 1st and 2nd grade uses Words Their Way. And something that we do for every grade level team is I make sure that every grade level team has a release day, so they can do a deep dive with data and do longitudinal planning around their professional growth and evaluation work and around their continuous improvement plan goals. Looking at the intermediate grades, 3rd through 5th grade, this is our SBA English Language Arts data. Again, we generally perform in the mid-80s to low 90s. Again, we use a variety of tools to monitor data in real time, team data protocols, the Lake Washington CDSAs, the Smarter Balance assessment, but we also use the interim assessments in mathematics, and we'll have a teacher come up and speak more about that. And again, safety net services as appropriate. Mathematics performance, very similar, mid-80s to upper 90s. Regular time by teams to look at data vertically and horizontally. And I'd like to welcome up one of our 5th grade teachers, Mary Kay Weinmeister, to talk about our use at Rockwell of the SBA Interim Assessments.
Hi, I'm Mary Kay Weinmeister, as Michael said, and I'm here to talk about one of the tools we have is to use SBA Interim Assessments, and those were made available last year. So our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teams piloted those last year and tried them out. It's a good way for the students. It's actually a help to both teachers and students. They get to see the test as it would look on the actual day, so it demystifies what the structure of the test is so that they don't get all weirded out about the big test. It gives us data that we can look at, we can use as a pre and a post test to see and judge if what we're teaching is actually showing growth. And it helps us kind of have a baseline for pre-instruction and post-instruction. And looking at my notes here, it's a low stakes way to lower anxiety and just get the kids comfortable with the test. So then in April and May when we start taking the SBA, it's just another day and it's not crazy stressful. And it's provided a lot of growth and help to all of us.
Thank you, Mary Kay. All right, and moving on to science, I'd like to welcome up Associate Principal Ryan Scott to talk about our initial performance on the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science.
The main thing I want to point out here, you can see some excellent work by our 5th graders at Rockwell. It's a K-5 endeavor. I know that teachers are really embracing the next generation science standards and starting to employ those even as we still are in the process of adopting a new curriculum for the district. And the fifth grade team in particular does something called Sci-Fry. And so one Friday a month, they get the whole fifth grade together and do some really great science exploration. The first time I saw it was a Mento stream shooting up the side of the building, and they had it set up to measure how tall it was. And they just really hold the kids to a high standard in their science work. Thank you.
All right. Looking again to our SIP work here and our work around closing the opportunity and achievement gap. At our school, one of the greatest opportunities is work with our English learners. And as you can see from the data array there, the needs and the cohorts present very differently year to year. I'm proud to share that we met our SIP goal last year in terms of supporting our English learners and their proficiency on the SBA, and we're doubling down on that. We're continuing that work and expanding it. We use a few different scaffolds and supports to help in that work. Again, culturally responsive teaching, using reference for the students as a starting off point. And again, this sheltered observation instruction protocol work. We've had several sessions around that already, and thank you so much to Director Pease for all of her work and her team on that. We have a foundational understanding, and now we're starting to do a deep dive on what can we do right now in that regard. And we're also looking at the concentric circles on how this work interplays with our writing curriculum work. And of course, parents are key. We have a group called the English Learner Parent Partnership Team. Several of those parents are in the audience right now. And these are parents who meet once a month, in part for community and to build friendships, but also to give us feedback on how we can meet the needs of their kids. So thank you to the parents who in that group who are here this evening. I would also like to talk about student voice and leadership, which I think is a shining moment at Rockwell. And so I'd like to welcome up one of our first grade teachers and leadership leads, Tony Gibson.
Good evening. Again, I'm Tony Gibson. We've moved our student leadership. It was 2 years ago, a student council where there was elections and assemblies, and we've moved it to a place where we're service group, where every voice counts. We have 26 third, fourth, and fifth graders that have established suggestion boxes in their classrooms. They bring their classmates' suggestions and their own. We're also open to any member of our community, student and teacher, to bring proposals that we can take on and make happen in the school. We currently have a recycling team that picks up recycling every Tuesday. We're working on a student presentation for making our world a better place in terms of picking up trash every day. And we also have a group that are working on making places that are safe at recess for students that don't like to play on the big toy or out on the field playing soccer. And those are all coming from our students. And I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, and last but not least, actually last and most excitedly, I'd like to welcome up one of our fifth grade Beagles, Barrett, to talk about his work around service in our community and raising funds for the Lake Washington School Foundation Pantry Pack program. He last year actually was recognized by GoFundMe as a GoFundMe Kid Hero, which came with a $1,000 donation, and he's going to tell you more about that. So Barrett, come on up, friend. All right. So Barrett, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about Pantry Packs?
Pantry Packs is a program that helps Lake Washington School District kids by providing them with food on the weekends. Pantry Packs are packed by volunteers and are distributed by school counselors. I'm blanking here. I raised $3,000 last year, and I am trying to raise $4,500 this year, and I've raised $2,000 so far. I hit $2,000 this morning. So,
So Barrett White, can you tell us a little bit, why is this so important to help others?
I believe it is important to help others because everyone deserves help.
That's a good answer. And and so our vision as a district is that every student is future ready, and our vision as a school is that every student is ready to be a member of their community and the global community. So I'm kind of curious about what you have planned for the future. What are your future plans?
I plan to start a nonprofit and/or continue to help others in the community.
All right. Barrett, yes, thank you. Good job. So I'll tell you, I don't know many grown-ups who've raised $4,000 for charity. That's I can't wait to help fund the nonprofit you start. It's actually 5,000. Oh, 5,000. Okay, let's get this correct here. That's great. Barrett, just really quickly, we give our Beagle Best here. We're safe, respectful, responsible, and kind. You are the embodiment of giving Beagle Best, so thank you for that. All right, well, thank you so much for letting us present and for the opportunity to do our part to serve our kids and bring the district mission and vision to life. I'm excited to send the class of 2031 over the stage, and you are welcome to join us at any time. And I know I need to address the board here, but just really quickly, because so many members of our school team are here, I appreciate you every day. You do amazing work for kids every single day, and I just want you to know how much you're appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a fabulous explanation of what the great things are happening out in the Rockwell community. It's wonderful to see and appreciate your taking the time to come down to tell us about pantry packs and the work that you're doing as well. So from there, we will now move to the recognition of our national semifinalists and commended scholars. So Dr. Steenham.
Yes, and I would like to invite Principal Kelly Clapp from Juanita High School to come forward, and she will then go through our list of recipients. And while she's coming up, I would just like it noted, I visited Juanita High School the other day, and I was able to find my way back to my car from the interior building all by myself.
I did
No
check
small
to see
feat.
if she could do it, though, before I just turned her loose. All right, hey, thank you. Good evening. It's my privilege to recognize some wonderful students here. They've worked hard. I think people just assume kids get great scores, they do great things, and it just happens easily. It isn't so easy. These kids have put in a ton of work. We are all very proud of them. And also, there's some people in the back that I think we need to thank. If you are a parent of one of these fine young people, will you please wave back there? Yeah, there you go. You have supported these students in their quest to be the best. So this year we had 13 commended scholars and 4 semifinalists, which is a big deal. All of these students are just going to come up very briefly, and they're going to go right in order. So Andrea, you're first. They're going to say their name, introduce themselves, a very brief bit, and on we go. So come on up.
And actually, sorry, since we do this every year with multiple schools, what we really want to hear from each one of your kids, if there's one teacher or one person in the system who you want to say thank you to and why, let us know.
They actually got a questionnaire that had that information, so.
Hi, my name is Andrea Gizila, and probably the first teacher I had was in 5th grade, and Miss Conroy really made me love to learn, so I would like to thank her for helping me get here.
Thank you, Andrea.
Hi, my name is Jenna Evert. In college, I plan on double majoring in marine biology and computer science. Due to my marine biology interests, I'm looking at colleges on the East and West Coast. So on the East Coast, I'm looking at Boston University and Barnard. And on the West Coast, I'm looking at schools in California, such as the University of Southern California. My best educational experience to this date has definitely been my science classes. They just keep getting better each year. All of my science teachers so far has been great. There was building circuits in Cambridge physics with Miss Pike, and then there was Mr. Bailey's entertaining lectures in chemistry. Currently, I'm enjoying my 2 biology classes, my favorite of which is biotechnology from Miss Spitzy, where I can combine my biology and technology interests and learn about the real-world applications of what we're studying in biology. Thank you.
Excellent.
Hi, my name is Tyler Yim, and some of the things that I plan on studying in college would be psychology and possibly something to do with politics. And so some of the schools that I'm looking at are Pomona, Claremont McKenna, and the University of Washington. And my best educational experience to date would have to be my Latin classes that I took in middle school at Stella Scola, and then the fact that it culminated in a 2-week Italy immersion course.
Hi, my name is Nitish Narasimhan, and although I'm interested in sciences and the technology and doing things in the medical field, I think probably my best educational experience to date is honestly all my history classes, especially in junior year and this year with Mr. Deligan, because he has made the class very enjoyable, and I would like to pursue history as well in addition to these science classes. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Bryce Coble. Currently my primary secondary education plan is to study engineering. My school that I'm looking at the most at this point is probably the University of Washington. And throughout other things, I'm still considering other options, for example, oceanography or marine biology. But so far my pick's been engineering. And I would say that, again, contrary to that, it wasn't a science class that I would say was one of my best educational experiences, but it was something very unique. And sophomore year, I got a chance to take a global perspectives class with a teacher who is no longer with us, Ms. Hansen. But she kind of taught us how to think. And the class was very unique in that it was all skills-based about critically thinking, analyzing arguments and sources, and it was very different than any other class that I've ever experienced. So I think that was probably one of my best educational experiences. Thank you.
Ms. Hansen just moved. It's not, that sounded, it sounded bad. Just thought I'd say that.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Nguyen, and for majors, I'm thinking of biology, and I want to, after that, get my doctorate in physical therapy, and I'm looking at the University of Washington right now. My best educational experience to date would probably be all my science classes that I've taken. AP Biology was really tough, but a really good learning experience for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Jones. I'm planning on going for a computer science degree, possibly at Utah State. And I would like to thank my parents for raising me smart and helping me get to this point.
Thank you very much. And each student has a nice certificate that I'll give them back there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to our students for all their hard work, and to the parents for supporting them, and the teachers and staff and the community as well. So with that, we will now move on to the next item on the non-consent agenda, which is the approval of a name for the new middle school at Redmond Ridge. So Dr. Stavem.
Yes, and I'm going to ask Dr. John Holman to come forward. This is very exciting. This will be the first new school naming of my tenure and an exciting point in the life of a new school. So John, we'll turn it over to you.
Great. And not many board of directors get to name 3 school facilities in a calendar year. And so you'll remember last January we brought you 2 new elementary schools in which we named Clara Barton and Ella Baker elementary schools. And tonight I am so pleased to have planning principal Heidi Paul here with us to provide you with information about the process and actually identify the new name of our new middle school. You'll see in tab 5 you have a situation recommendation which outlines both the situation, highlights the policy, FF, naming our school facilities, and I can assure you that Heidi and her team have followed that policy to a T. And in board briefs, you did receive the 4 names that were submitted to the students for naming. Those names were Timberline Middle School, Cedar Middle School, View Ridge Middle School, and Timberwood Middle School. And the recommendation tonight is for the board to adopt the name presented as Heidi presents it. And with that, I'll introduce Heidi Paul, our planning principal for the new middle school at Redmond Ridge.
Good evening. As John shared, my name is Heidi Paul, and I must say, as I start tonight, that I have one of the best jobs in the world as I open up the new middle school with some of the most talented and skilled staff members. I am honored tonight to represent the current 17 staff members that have already been hired and identified, as well as the 12-person naming committee that was made up of students, staff, and parents, with the purpose to share our name submission for board approval. Before I continue, I do also want to acknowledge our Director of School Support, Sue Ann Sullivan, as well as John Holman, for their great support and help in this process. I also want to acknowledge in the room tonight, there are 3 teachers who've spent their evening here. We have Candace Wondercheck, who is a science teacher, Barb King, who is a language arts and social studies teacher, as well as Jocelyn Zwink, who is an ELL and safety net teacher. If you could just wave to the audience. Along with the 14 other staff members, I wanted to acknowledge them tonight. They are not only currently teaching at their schools, but they are spending extra time as they continue to diligently plan for our future students. Over the course of the last several months, we have followed our district process. Our staff provided 3 assemblies at the elementary schools, Wilder, Baker, and Parks, and we also provided an assembly at Evergreen Middle School. There, we met with future students to outline the guidelines, as well as to collect their name, idea, and submissions. On November 14th was an exciting night for us. The naming committee reviewed 105 name submissions, and I'm excited to share that only one of those was inappropriate. I bet you would want to know, but I would not share because the remaining names were thoughtful and intentional and really worked to highlight not only our school community, but the environment and history. During that meeting, our students, staff, and parents selected 4 names that we believe best represented our community. As we know, names are very important. A name has potential not only to connect us to the past, but also to connect a community to the present. A name gives purpose, can garner respect, and also can define the collective efforts of a community. With this in mind, the naming committee had interest to intentionally choose those 4 school names you heard earlier, and our hope was that they would elicit a sense of inclusion, unify our student body, as well as give purpose and history and honor to the land and the natural environment that surrounds. Together, as a naming committee, we learned that in the late 1880s, the Redmond community was deeply impacted by the timber industry. Specifically, the fir trees that occupied Novelty Hill area, fueled the growth of jobs. It also increased industry, as well as residential homes that were built as loggers relocated and the city grew. The naming committee considered the history, as well as the intentional efforts made by the architects and designers of our new school. All of the trees on the property that were fallen have been reincorporated and repurposed back into our building. In conclusion, I am thrilled to share that through the voting process, we have now closed those results, and I'm here to submit the name of our new middle school for board approval. Through those collective processes, our student and staff and community identified that Timberline Middle School will be our new name. Timberline is a word that means the highest location where trees thrive and grow. This definition and name symbolically connects to our students. We believe this honors the history of the land and the natural environment, and we also believe this name defines the purpose of our community. This includes diligently as we work to create an environment that helps students not only grow, but to thrive in connection, integrity, kindness, empathy, resilience, and service to others. We ask that you consider Timberline Middle School as the name that defines our new community.
Thank you very much. I will now entertain a motion to approve the nominated name for the new middle school at Redmond Ridge, site number 72, as presented.
I move that we accept the suggested name for Timberline.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
This seems highly controversial name. But I do like the idea of it is the high point and aspiring to get there. It's not easy, but it's cool. So I like it.
I just want you to know I live down the street, basically, on 80th and 238th. And I watched this building go from land clearing to every stage, and it's magnificent to watch how quickly it's going up, how well it's going up, and I can't wait to see the kids in it.
We feel the same way.
Let's vote.
Okay, it has been moved by Director Stewart and seconded by Director Sage that we approve the nominated name for the new middle school at Redmond Ridge, site number 72, as Timberline Middle School. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Excellent.
Thank you.
It'll be great to be able to refer to it as Timberline Middle School now as opposed to Redmond Ridge Middle School. So thank you very much for the time it took and for the involvement of community staff, parents, kids. It sounds like an excellent process to bring this forward. So with that, we are going to be moving into public comment, but I'd like to just take a moment. Just give me a time. So we are in the process. So if you'd like to, we're going to take about a 2-minute break, and feel free for those of you who might have things to do or other things. We'll be moving to public comment and then the rest of our agenda this evening. You are welcome to stay. Please don't feel like you have to leave, but you are also welcome to leave, and we appreciate you taking the time this evening to come. So thank you so much.
If you have homework to do or homework to grade.
Okay, so the next item we have on our agenda is public comment this evening. I do have 3 people currently signed up. As just a reminder, we do provide an opportunity for the public comment during board meetings, and the public comment time is reserved during our work meeting for the board to hear from the public. Remember, there are multiple venues. Not only is there public comment, you can feel free to email us, you could call, you could even write a letter if you so chose. Please note that public comment is not a question and answer session with the board, and the board and superintendent will not respond to community members during public comment, as our goal is to listen and learn from you. Each individual is provided up to 3 minutes to speak. We do have a red, yellow, green light over there to help you out. In order to ensure that we hear from a variety of people, individuals cannot share or donate their time to others. We have a lot of different instructions on here. When your name is called, please approach the podium, speak into the microphone, and giving your full name and school attendance area for the record. It is important for all community members to feel welcome and safe during the board's business meeting. The board does not take public comments on issues related to personnel or individually named staff at board meetings. Audience members are expected to treat all attendees with respect and civility. So with that, I would like to call up our first person who has signed up, Zach Benzawi. So will you please come forward? Thank you so much.
Hello, LWSD School Board. My name is Zach Benzawi. I'm a junior at Lake Washington High School. I'm also a student ambassador in the King County nonprofit Sustainability Ambassadors. Our mission is to empower youth to catalyze community sustainability and to empower teachers to integrate relevance with rigor for community impact in the classroom. In October, we held our 5th annual LWSD Sustainability Kickoff at Lake Washington High School. In the past, we've held 3 kickoffs at the International Community School and 1 at Tesla STEM High School. The kickoff starts our school year on a high note, gathering dozens of passionate environmental stewards from our school district to think about different projects that can be implemented in our schools to drive sustainability at a district-wide scale throughout the school year. Today, I'm here to share with you about the kickoff and the amazing projects that came out of it. I'm excited to say that this kickoff was our best one yet. We had 4 elementary schools, 7 middle schools, and 5 high schools, which is about 30% of all schools in the school district. The top priority projects that came out of the kickoff were starting green teams in schools that don't already have them, getting schools to commit to Schools Under 2C, which was a program started by students at Tesla STEM High School, engaging in and collaborating with PTSA and ASB in order to drive sustainability and collective impact with both groups, to share success stories on the sustainability page on the district's website, and to convene our 4th annual Community Sustainability Summit in late spring with schools, cities, and businesses. We're currently planning this right now and will invite you in the coming months. We're also working with teacher leaders. We had a meeting on Monday, November 26th, where we gathered our passionate teacher fellows from Eastlake High, Juanita High, and Rosa Parks Elementary to work with Jen Rose, Hannah Seidler, and Kate Atbars from the district, as well as representatives from community groups, Sammamish City Council, and Mike Brent from the Cascade Water Alliance. Together, we looked at how these passionate educators are integrating problem-based learning focused on water systems and educating for sustainability into their classrooms. Here are the problem statements that they're working on right now. Jason Wessels, a biology teacher from Eastlake High, is focusing on the relationship between our water cycle, our watershed, and the water utilities we depend on. JD Stutz, a chemistry teacher from Juanita High, is teaching students to create an emergency water system for themselves in the event of a major earthquake that is due to hit our region in the coming decades and wreak havoc on our water systems. Emma Morris, an AP Environmental Science teacher from Eastlake High, is focusing on managing and conserving the clean water that we have and designing infrastructure that can integrate our systems in the most efficient way possible. Renee Wirtman from Rosa Parks Elementary is taking on the project of integrating social studies, NGSS, ELA, and arts curriculum to better work together in the classroom to maximize and enhance cross-curriculum learning for students. This is just the beginning. We're building off this momentum with our upcoming event. I just have like 30 more seconds. Our upcoming event, Engineering the Greenest Possible School Buildings. Teacher leaders, student leaders, and community leaders are convening at Bennett Elementary School, the greenest school in the Bellevue School District, this Wednesday, December 5th, from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. We've already invited Jed Reynolds and Forrest Miller from the LWSD Conservation Office to attend. We'd also like to work with the district to develop a sister workshop specifically for Lake Washington School District teachers, featuring the greenest school building in Lake Washington School District. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could do us a favor and leave your comments here with Diane, and then we can have those as part of the record as well. That would be great. Thank you very much for all the work you're doing in regards to this. This is fabulous. So our next person is Aman Narula.
Good evening. I live in Redmond Ridge. My children attend Redmond High. And I spoke with Diane on Friday, who put me up to speak with Shannon Pathama. I asked her why, unlike Issaquah School District, Lake Washington limits the posting of community flyers to its parents' body only to nonprofit organizations. She explained that this was a policy that was made way back before digital media was used to disseminate information through peat jar, like it is right now, and instead, physical flyers were sent to parents in student backpacks. So parents had objected apparently to their students being subjected to many advertisements, and so at that time, the district decided to limit the flyers to just nonprofits. Today, the old logic, therefore, does not apply of the flyers harming students, because flyers are digitally sent to parents who have not opted out of the Lake Washington School District's email system. Parents can also go to their home school's website and look up PJAR posted flyers for extracurriculars and other activities. As a parent of teens, I find the school website and the PJAR flyers as very helpful first place to start my discovery for an activity I may be searching for. I know that Issaquah School District has a policy of allowing for-profit organizations to post flyers, and the community really appreciates that, because then for any education-related searches, they can start at their local school's website before going anywhere else. That helps pull traffic to school websites because they now have more meaningful content than if only non-profit flyers were posted. Since peat jar postings are expensive, that acts as a screen for frivolous postings. As an example, I looked at the Redmond High School. Currently, they have 11 flyers versus 28 at Sunny Hills. It's not an apples-to-apples comparison because Sunny Hills is an elementary school and Redmond High is a high school. But even if you get flooded by flyers from for-profit organizations, it is all posted digitally, so it really doesn't matter. I would therefore humbly like to submit that Lake Washington should take another look at this issue, and just like Issaquah, permit for-profits to post their flyers through PJAR. Thank you very much. I actually don't have but I can email it if you like.
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And so the third person that we currently have signed up is Corky. Truan, sorry, yes, your last. I was going to allow you to say that.
Corky Truan, both my children have graduated through the Lake Washington High School Learning Community. Thank you. Hey, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Dr. Stavin, you're in your 5th month. Welcome. It'll be wonderful watching you continue to work. This is a future ready for every student district. We are for one, for all here. And it is vital that our entire 30,000 plus student body have the exceptional opportunity, not just to be a student, but to live in a house, live in shelter. Right now, this district has about 400 children that are classified homeless. One child is too many. So I encourage the Lake Washington School District to work with the 3 city communities to find ways to put every child in a shelter that they can continue to be future ready and not live in their car and not live with another foster family that they may have to move to another foster family or to another foster family and really contribute to a difficult pattern to be a future-ready student in the Lake Washington School District. If you could find the gracious community leaders in not only our community, but our businesses to help find resources to give these unfortunate students, through no fault of their own, they weren't put on this world to be homeless. We need a greater sense of safe and inclusive community, not only in the Lake Washington School District, but our neighboring school district as well, and then out throughout the state. If we take the lead here in the third largest school district in the state, we can start to institute change with our other school districts where there are almost 50,000 homeless children trying to go to school right now. Happy holidays. Let's find it in our hearts to do something proactive here and be a leading school district in our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your thought around that and the importance of dealing with homelessness and advocating for it. Okay, so our next move is the consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director LaLiberty. Dr. Stavem, will you poll the board?
Cassandra?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Siri?
Yes. And Dr. Stavem, could you review the donations, please?
Yes. This month, we have a large sum to report collectively from our PTSA in the amount of $45,375.85, and from private sources who give generously as well to our district in the amount of $2,557.55, for a grand total of $47,933.40. And we want to say thank you to everyone who contributed as part of those donations to our school district.
Yes, thanks very much in ensuring that the enhancement and enrichments that the students need in which to be future ready and to address these different needs of our community is greatly appreciated. So we will now move on to the non-consent agenda, and our first item on that is the second reading approval of the 2019 Capital Projects Levy, Resolution Number 2259. Dr. Stavem.
And I will ask Barbara to come forward, and she is available for just a brief recap and any questions that the board may have with the understanding that this is second reading.
Good evening. So I will give you a brief recap. The resolution in front of you is put in place as the district had a long-term funding plan that was recommended by our long-term task force. That funding plan included an April 2016 bond, which was passed, and a February 2018 bond that was not passed, and then future bonds coming up in future years. That February bond did not receive the required 60% voter approval to pass, and it would have provided capacity for additional 2,100 students. Our district continues with our unprecedented enrollment growth, past enrollment growth, and projected future enrollment growth. Our district continues to have immediate critical capacity needs that need to be addressed. So we have the proposed capital projects levy as part of this resolution after working with the board through numerous study sessions between March and November, convening a levy advisory committee. We provided an overview of the projects to the board at our November 19th board meeting. The levy would pay for, the levy totals, it's a 6-year capital projects levy totaling $120 million, or $20 million per year for 6 years. These levy funds would pay for our critical projects to address our enrollment growth and also student safety security. Specifically, it would include classroom additions at Lake Washington High School, including auxiliary gym and commons, classroom additions at Carson Elementary, Franklin Elementary, Rose Hill Elementary, and Twain Elementary. And it would also include expansion of core facilities where feasible and district-wide student safety and security updates. The estimated tax rates are listed for you in the situation recommendation. There is, with the addition of this levy, it is, the tax rate for construction will be maintained at the current rate of $1.16, which includes both prior bonds and this 6-year capital projects levy. So the deadline, in order for us to put the measure on the April ballot, the deadline for the April 23rd, 2019 election is February 22nd. 2019 is when we would have to submit this to the county.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Go ahead, your turn. No, go ahead. Just a rhetorical statement to, so this maintains our existing tax rate and does not raise taxes?
Correct.
Thank you.
Tax rate, yes.
And if my understanding is correctly, it is the paying off of the 2012 capital levy that was 6 years that did the additions, that is also.
Yes, so
that one has been paid off.
That one, it was actually voted in 2011, and that was paid off. And then we have prior bonds prior to 2016 that are being paid off, and then our 2016 bonds, and because we did not have the 2018 bonds, we can structure both the current bonds and the 6-year capital levy to maintain our tax rate at $1.16.
So this will continue sort of the conversation of being able to maintain and invest in our capital facilities as needed by being able to maintain a steady tax rate through it.
Correct.
Okay.
Maintains the steady tax rate.
And this is to address the average of 700 per year for the last 10 years of students joining us, correct?
This levy will address short-term critical capacity needs that will, it doesn't solve the problem for the average. So we have the long-term plan. We will continue to have need future bonds in order to address capacity needs, not only from our past growth, but proposed future or projected future growth.
But without these, it would be a severe setback for those students.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's what I was trying.
Just a quick point of clarification, I guess. Sometimes it gets confusing when we speak to a tax rate. If we can only collect a certain amount in a levy or a bond. So we have to, in this case, thank you for doing the math, determine what it's going to cost and lay out that dollar amount, and then work it backwards to put forth the $1.16 rate.
Correct.
If for some reason we collected more money than the amount we stated we needed to, what would happen?
So we're not allowed to collect more money than what our voters have approved. So as assessed value increases higher than what our assumptions are, then the tax rate actually decreases. So because we're collecting the same amount that our voters have authorized. So as assessed value grows, the district is not collecting more money. We're collecting the amount that the voters have authorized, and if as AV grows above our assumptions, then the tax rate decreases.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no other further questions for Barbara, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2259, 2019 Capital Projects Levy.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty, and actually what I'm going to do, is there any further discussion prior to moving on to the vote? I would like to say that, first, I appreciate all the work that has gone into this. There's been multiple study sessions in looking through this and going through, looking at multiple ways of really trying to figure out where are the critical needs and where is that. We looked at, do you build a new elementary school in Kirkland, or is the additions another option to do in which to do that, as well as on Sammamish? And the decision was finally made in looking at that to work with additions, because it allowed us to build capacity in multiple places and not have to focus in one and be able to address that need specifically. The key, I think, in looking at this is, and I would support this resolution, is in 2016, as we just got to do that, we just got to name the Redmond Ridge Middle School Timberline. And so we have opened up, we will be opening up 3,000 new seats within the Redmond learning community by the end of this year, or next year, I'm sorry, which is great. This is now the next possibility to help open up many more seats in other areas for that critical need. But we still haven't addressed our need, as we all know. So the additional work that will be happening in the sense of we have a strategic planning initiative that's coming up starting in January. That'll start to address some of the other issues, and then we'll start looking at how we deal with these facilities, not just from a critical need in building, but possibly from some more innovative, different ways of looking at putting embedded classrooms in different locations and looking at programming and opportunities. But that's going to take time and the community involvement in doing that going forward. So this is step one. Well, actually, it's about step 4 of many of those that we've done, and it will be continuing. So we appreciate the community involvement and the work that staff and community really put into putting this together so that we have a really clear critical need in being able to address these issues. Any other discussion? Okay, so with that, it has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director, oh, sorry. Been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Carlson that we adopt resolution number 2259, 2019 Capital Projects Levy as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you again for all the hard work on doing that, and we now move forward with step 4. The next item on the non-consent agenda is the monitoring report, ER2 Science. So Dr. Stephen.
Yes, and I will ask Mike Van Orden to come up and share some of our data related to science achievement in our district and some of the program development and ongoing work in that area.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to present on science tonight. Just a reminder, with our ER reports, we're connecting our end results to our executive limitations in this area, particularly around our academic program, with a focus on our programs and curriculum and instruction and assessment that helps our students meet standards in science. Before I go too much more tonight, too, I also want to mention, as we start looking at the data, that we are in a new assessment environment. So we have new Washington science assessment results to share with you tonight. So I want to give you that in front so that it will help you to interpret some of the data that we share later. But before we do that, we want to just give a high-level recap of our science program. So at the elementary level, we have 120 to 150 minutes per week of science instruction. Those are typically delivered a couple times a week in 3 units. And those are covering pretty much our old standards. So we are right now in the process of looking at and evaluating our curriculum to see if it actually matches up with the new standards and to make recommendations for a potentially new curriculum that would come to the board in the spring. That curriculum would be aligned with our new next generation science standards and Washington state standards. So that could be potentially implemented starting in the spring of next school year. At the middle school level, you'll recall we reviewed our curriculum and made recommendations for new curriculum that was implemented in 2016. That was for an integrated 6, 7, and 8 science approach. And we also developed curriculum alignment guides that help our teachers know how to align the curriculum with the new standards. And then at the high school, the year before, we reviewed curriculum and made recommendations for new materials there as well. Those were in the areas of earth science, biology, physics, and chemistry. We're in the process right now, again, of looking at that curriculum and the courses that the curriculum is embedded in to see how well that's aligned with the new standards. And so the results that we're going to share with you tonight will help us to see how to best match up the experience that students have in their courses as well as the course sequence they take. And so that is a process where we're looking at things like seeing if we can embed earth science content in biology and chemistry courses, or seeing different course options that students can take over their 4 years in school. At the high school level, students are required to take 3 years of science. 2 of those are required lab science courses, and then there's a third course that students can take that's aligned with their pathways and interests. I don't believe have any science classes that are not a lab-based science class. So just that's something to know. That doesn't mean we couldn't offer science courses in the future that weren't lab-based, but currently all of our science courses are lab-based. So tonight in our presentation, we're going to share results for elementary, middle, and high school. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a new state assessment for science that was administered for the first time last year. And so a couple big ideas there. One is it's a new assessment, so it's a baseline. In the past, we've shared trend level data with you, and so tonight we're really looking at kind of a first year of data. The other thing to remember, whenever there's a new assessment or new curriculum or new program that's implemented, there's typically something called an implementation dip that follows. And so you will see some of that potentially in our data tonight. That is a function of a new assessment, new procedures, a new structure sometimes. And so we'll unpack that a little bit, but that's just something to know in advance. So overall, our grade 5 students performed relatively well. In fact, they were the highest scoring group of students in the state among the 49 largest districts. There was a slight change if you were comparing a previous assessment to this one. So again, there's a couple things going on there. One is different assessment, different standards, and again, remember that idea of that implementation dip I mentioned. Nonetheless, the fact that our students are outperforming just about every district in the state with curriculum that isn't fully aligned with the standards, I think really speaks to the quality of our teachers and the instructional program that we're having. And then we anticipate with new curriculum that is better aligned to standards, we should see what we typically see after a new assessment's implemented. You see a slow and steady improvement in performance over time. So I think this again is something to take with a grain of salt. Be careful about comparing to past year's results and to see how our students are doing moving forward. So we'll see a trend emerging starting next year, and so we want to see that we're making steady growth over time. And I think, again, that number one among the 49 largest districts, I was looking at similar districts around the state, and we're just doing amazing work. The other thing to note is, again, we're not comparing, we're not looking at a trend, but the difference between the scores last year on MSP and the new scores were about a 5% drop for us. Most across the state, it was about a 10 to 12% drop. So that speaks to kind of that gap was much more significant in other schools and districts. So looking at subgroups of our students, we do see the similar patterns that we saw with math and English language arts, that there is a gap for our Black African American students and Hispanic students. Remember, the number of Black African American students is such that we don't have a state ranking. At the same time, there is an achievement gap. For our Hispanic students, there's an achievement gap, and our students are ranking right now 9th in the state. So again, that's an area to work on, and at the end of the presentation tonight, we'll talk about some of the strategies and approaches we're thinking. One of the main areas we're looking at is the culturally responsive teaching that you heard about earlier when Michael Clark was talking about the school's approach. One of the things that's interesting that we don't have displayed here, but worth noting, is that when you control for income and language, so you pull that out, we still have a gap for our Hispanic students. So Hispanic students that are speaking English, they're not in an EL program, and they're not low income, are still not performing at the same level of some of our other groups. Special education, we also see a gap. Again, though, it's good to have that comparison to other schools and districts. And so for our grade 5 students, they're special education or receiving special education services, highest ranking among the 49 largest districts. So that's noteworthy. still an area to focus on and still an area to work on. At the same time, as I mentioned last time, that's not something that would necessarily then ask us to go forward and look and see what are other districts doing. It's more, how do we improve the services that we're offering here within our district, because we're outperforming other districts around the state. We also pulled our data by disability category, as we did with the math. Something that I think was noteworthy to point out here, that 75% of students meeting standard in the emotional behavioral disorder category, that is a piece of data that gives us some information. When we get results like that, that tells us that our students are getting access to the curriculum. If they weren't getting access to the curriculum, they wouldn't be able to meet standard on the assessment, even in these 68% categories. So that really starts to suggest to us that there may be a need to do more intensive intervention. There might be some other foundational skills that students need that are interfering with their access to the content. But I think this is, and I basically saying we appreciate the fact that there was the suggestion to look at this level of detail, because it is giving us some actionable information, as opposed to saying, well, we're getting 49% of our students receiving special education services and they're not meeting standards. Well, this suggests that for some of our groups, that access to curriculum may not be an approach that we might want to use, whereas with other groups it may be. So I think that's been a helpful strategy for us as we move forward. In our EL program, in our 5th grade, we also see, as we see in ELA and math, that our students who have exited the EL program are performing as well as students who never were EL students. And our 5th grade students who are still in EL program are ranked 2nd in the state. So some pretty great results in elementary. And again, knowing that we have curriculum that's not closely aligned or carefully aligned with the new standards really gives us some hope as we look forward to seeing that we'll have potentially new curriculum that really is tightly aligned. We'll have students that are more familiar with the tests, and we're expecting that our performance should continue to improve. For our low-income students, we do see, as we see in our other areas, a gap. And again, as with our other areas, there is that significant difference in terms of state ranking. So in other areas, we're in the top 10 usually, and in science, pretty much in every other category, we're 1 or 2, with a few areas that are 7 or 8. Whereas with our low-income students, we are seeing that difference. Not as much so as we did see with math and ELA, but still 17th makes us wonder what's going on there. And so we'll talk at the end about some specific strategies that we're working on. And I think it's partly a function of thinking about students in ways that maybe we haven't thought about before, where other districts that have large numbers of students who are in poverty are really thinking about approaches and building strategies into play. That may be something that we can learn from by sharing or comparing with other districts. And then moving on to middle school, again, fairly good results. We have 79% of our students meeting standard on a new assessment, 3rd in the state, so not quite as good as 5th grade, but still high performance. And so this is an area where we're thinking that there's potentially a need to look at how we provide support for teachers in delivering new curriculum that is aligned with standards, and so that'll be something we talk about towards the end of the presentation, about the training and support that we're continuing to provide for teachers as they deliver instruction that's aligned to the new standards. As with our other grade levels, we do see performance and achievement gaps similar to 5th grade. So our Black, African American, and Hispanic students, we're seeing that gap. And again, even when you control for language with both Black, African American, and Hispanic students, we see a gap. And when you control for income, you see a gap. So that's something to keep in mind as we look at it, is there's probably a combination of thinking about factors related to income and poverty, and there's also probably a need to think about factors related to race and culturally responsive teaching. Looking at special education, as I mentioned before, similar results. Again, though, we're looking at 3rd highest scores in the state. Now, 36% is not an area that we should be celebrating. At the same time, when we're thinking about approaches, it probably makes more sense to look internally and look at strategies and do things like I mentioned before, which is to look at groups of students and to see, is it a function of them having access to the curriculum? And so we think about things at the secondary level in particular, like co-teaching and opportunities for kids to get really strong literacy and math instruction that supports science. And so we're thinking about, at the secondary level, looking at different groups, that there's some potential there to give us some guidance for how we approach science in maybe a different way than we would at elementary. EL, here's an interesting thing. We still are getting very good results, our exited students. We don't see that outperforming like we've seen in all of our other areas. Still about a 6 percent point gap, not as much as we've seen in other areas. At the same time, it's an area that we can focus on and think about. Kelly Pease is doing some really nice work with our secondary programs around literacy instruction. And you might say, well, literacy is not science, but science has a very strong language component to it. And so we think that that might be an area that can help us. Also be thinking about our PSYOP strategies that we're working on that give kids access to academic vocabulary. And that's a way that they can access science as well. So we see those as two promising practices. And again, our EL students are ranking quite well in relation to other schools around the state. Low income, as before, this is an area where we see that persistent gap and that persistent ranking compared to other schools that's not comparable to our other areas. And so definitely an area of need and focus. Finally, moving on to 9th grade and some interesting data to share with you tonight. So I think last time there was a question about looking at students who are earning a C or higher as opposed to simply passing science courses. So we have that data to share with you. Currently, though, as just a celebration, 96% of our 9th grade students are getting full math credit. And so that's something to say that they're on track to graduation. But here's the interesting thing, and I think we'll unpack this more in our other areas, particularly next year, but also this year as we're doing improvement work. That percentage drops to 85% when we look at students who are only earning a C or higher. And so you'll see as we look at our subgroups that that line that's very comparable in terms of students earning full credit, those gaps start to appear again. We also have 31.3% of our students meeting standard on the new science assessment. And so that is more a function of the number of student test takers. And I was going to ask Tim Krieger just to come up and provide a little bit of context for that data that you're seeing up there and explain what those numbers mean. Tim, you want to share that?
Quick clarification before we go there. C or higher. It's been a little while since I've been in high school. What's not higher than a C but passing?
A D.
So we have Ds. Okay, and 10% of our kids in science have a D.
Well, probably more. So 10% of those, 96% have a D.
Yeah.
And I'll add one more thing to that. A C minus is also lower. So this data is C or above. So what's below would be the C minus, the D plus, and the D. So.
Do we also include pass fail?
So for the C or above, what's going to happen is those are going to be taken out of that analysis, but they're included in the passing analysis. So it's just a wash for the C or above since there is no C or above. So, for the science for grade 11, as you remember, 2 years ago we had a very similar situation with math where we had a high refusal rate because those students couldn't meet the state assessment requirement through the EOC. And by the time they got to the 11th grade, many had met that requirement. This is somewhat of a similar situation. This is the class of 2019. Science is not a graduation requirement until the class of 2021. So when this assessment was administered in the spring, we had quite a few students not show up. So the refusal rate was about 61%. So we had about 39% of students take the assessment. The first row that you'll see is of all students that should have taken the test, that's our accountability percentage. The one that's below that is of the students that actually took the test, how many passed? Any questions on how that's laid out?
And do we have information on representation within the kids who bothered to show up?
You'll see that in the coming slides in terms of, you'll look at the number that were expected to
Sorry,
be there.
It's not so much the number that showed up. I mean, it's going to be 30% pretty much across the board. More it's a matter of, did our AP students show up or not? And did our non-AP students show up or not? I'm curious.
I don't have that off the top of my head. We could definitely find that out, though.
Okay.
But you'll see in the coming slides the difference
that won't be
by
a problem in the
SPED and
future.
race ethnicity.
Yeah, thanks.
The other thing I'll add to that, and I'm going to date myself, I think it was about 15, 20 years ago, I was sharing information about a new state graduation requirement, high stakes assessment, and people were going, oh, what's the 31%? And we said, when it becomes a high stakes assessment, numbers go up, test scores improve. So for the class of 2021, is that correct? It'll be a graduation assessment, and when students know that it's a high-stakes assessment, we typically see a pretty significant increase. So we want to be really cautious with this data. One, in terms of who showed up to take the assessment. Two, in terms of how seriously students are taking an assessment that doesn't have a high-stakes accountability measure. So just take that with a grain of salt, similar to a new first year of an assessment and an implementation dip. We want to be thinking about these numbers and analyzing them, but also recognizing that there's some limits to what we can interpret from them.
And another clarification, because I haven't been paying as much attention at the state level as I should be. They're doing away with the end-of-course assessment? Does this mean you're going to have 11th graders who are in AP Physics having to go back and take a general science assessment?
As of now. And so,
okay,
if you're a
that
betting
just
man,
entered my things
yeah.
I'm lobbying my
Right.
legislators on.
Yeah. I think, again, I'm going to just give a little bit of editorial here. We're performing quite well. So we're typically one of the highest performing districts in the state. There are districts that aren't at that same level. And when we have large numbers of kids that aren't meeting a state graduation requirement in the 11th grade, I think there's going to have to be something that happens. That would be my prediction if I was a betting person. So looking at our results, and again, this is where I think it is interesting. So this is data that we do have that's consistent year after year, and it was a response to a request by the board to look at students that are performing at a C or higher. Those gaps start to come back. And so here we were saying, yeah, we're doing really well, our students are passing classes, and we do want our students to pass classes because that helps us to know that they're on track for graduation. And that's one of the things we measure. We also want to make sure that when they do graduate, they're prepared for the opportunities that will be presented to them. And so this is starting to give us an indication of that and giving us an area of focus, that when we do look at C minuses or Ds, that we do have students that probably need more support. And so that would be looking at our instruction, looking at the kind of supports that are built into the school day and after school day to make sure that our students are succeeding in their classes.
Oh, sorry, that next one had what I was after.
Oh, the next one is. So this was our subgroups. Again, this is where I think we have to be careful because we don't know within these groups who's showing up. And so there may be factors related to students' enrollment patterns. There may be factors related to their race and ethnicity. There may be factors related to income. But these do give us at least kind of a first indication of how students may be performing by subgroup. And we do see similar types of performance gaps as we saw in some of our other data, in particular math and ELA. But again, I wanted us to be careful, and we were careful about not over-interpreting these, but we do see gaps. Special education, C, again, this is just consistent. And I have to say, I was a little bit surprised by this, that there is such a clear indication of that gap re-emerging when you look at C minus or higher in all of our areas. Not quite as severe as it is for the achievement scores, but still 52% of our students who are not earning a C or higher. That's something to think about. And then again, we still have gaps, not quite as much as we saw in our 8th grade scores. And again, I think when that becomes a high stakes assessment, that'll be something we'll want to keep an eye on. EL students, there is a small gap there for students earning, but interestingly enough, this is where it's always surprising and fun to look at data. We have a greater gap for students earning C than we do for students earning C minus. So that gap actually reduces a little bit there. So that's something that tells us maybe there's some things happening that might be supporting our EL students. And then similar gaps for the new Washington State assessment. And then low income, the gap reemerges when we look at C or C minus or lower. And a gap for our new state assessment results. So I think this is where I think the greatest interest is, so how do we actually take those results and make them into actionable plans? And I think last year there were some questions about, look, you need to think about what the causes might be before you just start jumping into solutions. And so that is something that we're constantly asking ourselves. What might be the factors that are contributing to student scores or student results that would then lead us to potential strategies? And so we think about a couple things. When we think about race and ethnicity, for example, we know that student performance is compounded by income status, and that's something we need to be thinking about. But we also know that if you control for that, there are some factors that are probably at play in our classrooms. And so a lot of our work around equity and culturally responsive teaching are founded on the idea that if we can attempt to connect to students and connect to their culture and have curriculum that reflects them and have our teachers well trained, that might be a factor that helps us get to that gap related to race and ethnicity. And in particular, as we look at our new science curriculum, we had some training for our adoption committee members around bias and cultural competence. We also are doing the same with our instructional materials committee, and that's really one of the foundational things we're looking for in new curriculum. So as new curriculum comes on board, we're looking at racial equity as a lens to view it. We're also looking at instruction that goes with it. So when we do our science training next year, we'll be making sure that SIOP is a strategy that's integrated. So then we're thinking about culturally responsive teaching and English learners together with science training and really taking advantage of the time that we do have with our teachers. We're also thinking about students from low-income households and a need there. So we know that there's a whole series or a whole host of factors that affect student performance when they're in low-income settings. So one is, that early learning and access to high, rich vocabulary. And so our Head Start preschool program and our new science curriculum at the preschool level really is designed to provide that really early support for kids. And then continuing that up into the elementary grades and knowing that making sure that kids get really high quality literacy instruction and that SIOP focus even for students who are not EL is a function that will help, or a strategy that will help meet the needs of some of our students who are in low income. One of the things though I think that we are starting to look at and recognize now is that there also needs to be those community and social supports built around students. And so as I mentioned in prior presentations, we have our McKinney-Vento Homeless Liaison who's out providing supports and our Head Start program that provides early supports. But as you heard tonight when Matt Gillingham was presenting, we're also looking at the social emotional support, so the trauma-informed interventions, the community partnerships that we can have that can come in and backfill services for students that maybe we can't necessarily provide in a school setting, but with community support we can provide to students. So those are factors that will, or those are strategies that will help address factors that sometimes come with poverty that relate to achievement. And so that's part of our larger MTSS work, is integrating the social emotional, the behavioral supports together with the academic supports and really think about that more systematically. And we think that's going to be a strategy that addresses the results that we see for students who are low income. As I also mentioned, we had some results in special education, and so that's an area where we see one of the big factors is access to curriculum and access to general education, and so we are making very intentional efforts to build in co-teaching and inclusion. We just met with our inclusion advisory group today and are in the first stages of talking about how do we make our school settings inclusive for all students so every kid gets access to all the core curriculum, all the same behavior supports that every kid has in a really inclusive way. So we're going to what are the factors that contribute to student outcomes, and then how do you build strategies to address those factors? And so you'll see that embedded in our strategies as we move forward. And then as we talk about our strategic plan, you should see those embedded in that as well. The last thing I'll say to wrap up for our strategies is one of the things we also know is that those access to those real world experiences and those meaning making types of experiences in science are so important. And so Dr. Stavum has been really pushing us and encouraging us to think about things like coding and STEM in our curriculum. And so that'll be part of our elementary science curriculum. As we look at our technology levy, we're looking at technology that builds in really rich STEM opportunities for kids. As we move into the secondary level, Matt Montebianco and Dr. Pierce are looking at STEM opportunities for kids there. So that makes science come alive, and then as a result of that, you see students performing better in science. So that's also a part of our strategy, and we should be building into our next strategic planning process as well. So I think that is it for our strategies. All in all, in particular, because of a new assessment, we are making the conclusion or the assertion that we have partial completion or partial achievement of our ends results. Remember, we set that 85% target, and we're a little bit below that because of a new assessment. My belief is that that should come up next year, and we should be achieving for all students in our subgroups we continue to need to work on.
Oops. I will go ahead and open it up for discussion. Director Sage.
Quick question on teaching. Is it a building principal decision how many co-teaching classrooms they have? Is it looking for volunteers amongst teachers who would like to be trained? How does that work?
Right now, it's building level. What we're doing is we're building in training sessions so that by the next 2 to 3 years, every school will have a team of teachers who have been trained to do co-teaching effectively, and then we'll start to increase the expectation so that there are co-taught classes in each school. Our focus for that training is primarily at the secondary level for math and ELA, and then in elementary, we're also, or for special education, and then at the elementary level, we also have built in ELL students. So as part of our inclusion efforts, we should see that co-teaching should be a part of all of our secondary schools within the next 3 years.
And then one more question. There was something on the slide before the last one about training for people for the adoption curriculum.
Right.
Is that something that doesn't happen right now, or
so
is this
actually,
new?
no, that's a great point. We are, Dr. Rose is working with a team of teachers that represent each school. And there's an elementary, a primary, and an intermediate teacher, so K2 and 3-5. Those teachers are receiving training, and then they are responsible for going back to their building and sharing some of that training that they acquired. So that's kind of a first tier as we review curriculum and evaluate curriculum. Next year, as we implement new curriculum, then there'll be much more intensive training. And then what we're looking at doing, as I mentioned, is seeing how we can make sure that that's aligned with other efforts like SIOP, so that when we're delivering science instruction training, we're also incorporating SIOP strategies, because that's what we want our teachers to do. But typically, whenever we have a large adoption, we have pretty intensive training around the curriculum and materials aligned to the standards for 2 to 3 years. And with our elementary science adoption, because it's so materials intensive, there'll probably be a phase-in of the materials so that teachers can get accustomed to and use them. So remember, we have a kit-based approach, so probably 1 to 2 kits a year for the next couple of years so that they can build those in. The other thing, recall, as we mentioned, is there'll be some STEM components as well, and so there'll be some training around that.
Go ahead.
So you didn't call on me, but I'm going to go ahead anyway.
Go, Director.
Okay, thank you. Mike, I noticed that with the new test for 2018, there's the income gap. I'm sorry, the achievement gap for low-income students grew dramatically because under the new test.
Yeah.
Is that well? I'm going to ask you to speculate as to why that's the case, and then I may have a follow-up question.
Yeah, again, I think it's a function of the number of students, not only district-wide, but in any individual school. And so in a district where there's high concentrations of students from low-income households, there's lots of professional development and learning and strategies that are built into that school. So for example, our 2 title schools get lots of professional learning and support to really think about high-quality instruction, where we may not have done that as much. I think so that's an opportunity for us to think about, is how do you deliver really high-quality literacy instruction that supports all kids. There's probably some other things, as I mentioned, though, those supports. So I was talking with Jeff DeGallier from Muir, saying, thinking about how do we connect to the community and provide family supports that will allow us to reach out to families, do wraparound services, take care of those needs that my families have that might address that. So that's something else we're thinking about, is that social emotional part.
If I could just follow up, have you looked at the schools and compared low income by school as to outcome on?
So again, very interesting. So typically you would expect that as the rate of students that are from high or low income households increases, achievement decreases, right? For us, we actually get this kind of weird inverse relationship. Our 2 title schools have some of the higher performance in relation to their population. So they're actually outperforming where you'd expect if you rank all students on a trend line of rate of free and reduced versus achievement. So that's something that, again, points to there's probably some very specific intentional professional learning that's happening in those schools, as well as some ways of thinking about providing services that we could replicate and put into other schools.
And sorry, I'm going to restate that because I want to make sure I understood. That if you're just comparing the low-income students at the title schools, they're outperforming low-income students at the non-title schools.
Some of our schools with much lower percentages of students from free and reduced price households. So again, that trend line you'd expect is kind of reversed.
Go ahead.
So one other follow-up on that. If you were to just plot it based on percentage of low-income students and percent passing of those low-income students. Do you see a relationship between those as they go through?
You know, interestingly
Or is it
enough,
a U-curve, or is it?
There isn't a pattern for the whole school. So Tim's done this really wonderful trend line for all the schools in the state. So you'll have, you know, very low free and reduced, very high achievement, and then higher free and reduced and low achievement. So you get this declining achievement trend. We have some schools that are outperforming way above where you'd expect them if you look at schools in similar demographic bands, right? So you'd expect them to be performing much lower than if they, you know, if they were getting high free and reduced, but they're actually really performing quite high. In fact, much higher than students with lower free and reduced. But there's not a clear pattern. Like some schools are doing really well and some are under the trend line. So I think it's, you know, part of it's a school to school and a multi-year review. But it's not a clear, like across the district, all of our students are underperforming where you'd expect.
Thanks. Questions? Okay. Director Stewart, I think
Yeah.
Chris would like to wait.
I'll let you go first. Okay. You have a lot to say, I think. Noting that you said that the Title I schools, you had higher performing, it would seem to me, having been in some of those schools when I was growing up, it seems to me that perhaps it's the social issues facing those students that, you know, where there's more of a diversity of incomes, that there may be more pressures or different pressures than you're seeing in a school that has very high Title I. So I think you're seeing a different dynamic between the students and perhaps the environment of the school.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go ahead and let you go first.
Okay, again, I love this. This is really cool stuff. There are many things where I'm thrilled to see the breakout, for example, on SPED by subset within SPED. And I agree with the interpretation on the things like behavioral and communication SPED, that those students are able to access the curriculum. This is fantastic news. I don't think I have different questions around the SLD students than I had for math. I have the same questions and concerns. The first is that where did our SLD students go? So we have about the same number of 8th graders as we have 5th graders. And in 5th grade, we have about, let's see, I did the math. In 5th grade, we've got about 116 specific learning disabilities. And in middle school, we've only got 70. That's a non-trivial reduction of the number of kids with learning disabilities, which actually sort of sparked an idea that I didn't bring up with math, but it would apply, it's not subject specific. I'm very interested in having a report out on post-SLD children. Mm-hmm. If they've ever had a diagnosis that got them an IEP, but they are not currently being served, I want to be able to say, are those kids succeeding or what? Or are they just getting lost in the noise of the rest of the students? Because, you know, with 50 kids who've disappeared from our SLD category, are they just not dyslexic anymore? Or are they succeeding or not?
Or did they go elsewhere?
Bingo. I want to know all of the above.
Or is it variation?
Exactly. There are many
year and
hypotheses. I just want to be able to see it.
Yeah.
So, the second thought I had, and this is getting back to the high school indicator, I know we've got something coming down the pike that is going to be just as inane as taking our students who are in geometry in 8th grade and making them go back and pass an 8th grade SBA, which takes 2 weeks out of the geometry curriculum for these students to go back and review 8th grade math so that they can pass the 8th grade math test with flying colors instead of continuing to learn more geometry. That drives me insane at the middle school level. That's not a fight that's really worth but at the high school level, oh my God, if you've got an AP student in 11th grade science and we're gonna make them go back and take an SBA, I would very much like to be able to come up with a better indicator that we can give to the legislators, that we can say, pass your SBA and we can already have those numbers for to present as a solution, rather than telling them that you've got a problem, telling them, here's what you should be doing rather than what you're going to make us do in 2021. So I don't know the answer to that, but I'm hoping you guys can come up with something that basically says, look, there's categories of kids where we can assume that they would pass that SBA, and we shouldn't have to take them back and make them take that test. They've got other problems to study for.
Can I ask Tim 2 questions on that too? One is, will students be allowed to take the test as a 10th grader?
So right now, SBA hasn't made a determination if the consequences won't be allowed to take.
Right. And it's going to be one of those things that it'll come down, we're playing chicken with it, and eventually somebody's going to blink. But if we can give them a solution,
well,
they
the
might
other thing
take
that's come up, for example, is can you swap out a different high-stakes assessment, like an AP exam, that might allow the
exactly.
student to
Well, AP is subject test and SAT. There are a lot of things. I don't think we're going to be able to give them a B on a science class. That doesn't.
No, but there already are means in which to do so. It's getting the adoption of the legislature that allows the school districts to be able to do that.
So I definitely want to be
the federal
able
already
to.
allows it.
But and still, that's something where if we're only going to be testing a subset of our students, I want that the censored students to be, and yes, we believe they've all passed because here's the proof, so that we can just sort of sum that up. Okay, get off my soapbox. Now, there's one thing that I noticed tonight, and again, it's not specific to the subject, but it's something I'm very interested in looking at, and that is that when we look at our student achievement, the gaps by group, the Hispanic Latino is the one that I find of the greatest concern because it's the greatest number of students. There are more Hispanic Latino students not at standard than there are African American students, period. Because of that, the one thing that I do, again, a compliment to the group, the data we're getting on ELL really does continue to convince me that we're doing a spectacular job of turning a child who's learning English into just another student. They're not distinguishable from the background of the population. This is fantastic. It speaks well to our students, it speaks well to our teachers, it speaks well to the flexibility of a child learning a language. I can't imagine 3 years after starting a new language being tested in science. Anyway, that said, our Hispanic Latino students are the ones where they're going to have the greatest confounding with the ELL variable. Many of them will still be in ELL. To the extent that that's dragging down the performance of Hispanic Latinos, I'm not worried about a student who's still in ELL. I am worried about the students who are not in ELL. So when it comes to the breakouts, both for SPED and for race ethnicity, if that could be just non-ELL students, I would find it much more meaningful in helping me understand how much concern I have around low performance of a group that might be high in ELL. And I'm confident from the data you've shown us that the ELL program is performing well. So that's one. And I'm sorry, I just have to briefly editorialize. Below a C gets credit? Anyway, I've said enough on the subject. I know, Mark, I know, you feel very passionately.
You've got a group of students out there that are trying their best.
Yes, I'll give them that,
but
but that's the whole thing, you should find a way to get them a C.
Well, maybe your students in history, they aren't making it in history of their science students.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. And that's about it in terms of my major questions. I have one thought on, and this I need to show, not tell. When it comes to evaluating the performance of the low-income students, the problem with many of our schools is they've got so few low-income students that it's just stochastic. If you've got less than 10 kids in the building, you don't get a meaningful number on what fraction are passing. Year to year, you can go from 30% to 70%, and it means nothing about how the building's performing. It's just that particular batch of students. But there are ways to look at it in terms of if you aggregate across the population. We've got 28 elementaries. If you just rank order them by how many kids are low income, and then you take the top 2 schools, which are going to be our 2 Title I schools, and they're one category, and then that's probably going to be about 20% of our low income students. If you then just aggregate the schools beneath those until you wind up with another 20% of the students and another 20%, so that we wind up with quintiles, then that comparison will be meaningful, even though any one of those buildings wouldn't have enough kids. And it'll give us a sense for, is it really working against the kids to be a very small minority in a very high income neighborhood? Is that a particularly bad context for them? Because my intuition is that just doing the same things we're doing in our title schools actually won't really necessarily help in that context. But we'll need different strategies. But first we need to see if it's a real, where the challenges lie. So, anyway. And there ends the Gospel according to Carlson for this evening.
One of the things I just want to remind us of is Mike and his team and many others have been working on the MTSS framework, the multi-tiered systems of supports, which takes into effect all of the academic types of interventions, but it also takes into account other surrounding circumstances that may contribute to a student's failure rate, which might be attendance. You have to be in class and hearing the content and having access to it, as well as access to practice materials at home, which may be online. And so we're trying to look at all of those surrounding factors as well, and we know that having that MTSS framework in place with training around that is also another mechanism that we hope really shows some good results because it helps us take a wider view of our students.
All right, thanks again for all the work. I do think I appreciate the grade C and that breakout and doing that actually with the math and the algebra and that piece that we've spoken to. I think that would be highly beneficial actually for any time we're looking at that, because especially with math and those build. And so if you have a D and unfortunately you've missed that information, will you be able to make it up the next time around? So that's kind of the concern that I would see with wanting to do that. I know we do have some, I think, Tesla STEM, if I remember correctly, has a requirement if you don't have a C, you take that course again. So there is something to think about of how we work with that to ensure mastery of subject, not seat time. Also, the other piece was that 10% drop that you saw. And the piece with that is, what are those supports that are in place when a student, because our goal is to have every student future ready and to have every student able to succeed. How effectively are we doing those supports? I just know at the college level, my daughter has dyslexia and struggled for quite a period of time. We did a lot of tutors. So luckily I was able to do a lot of tutoring home, and then when I wasn't able to do the subject she was doing, I was able to pay somebody to do so. We have in our community families that can also do that, but we have many that can't. Right. And that means that we as a system have to be able to provide that opportunity. When she got to college, she was able to access a tutor for any class she needed in which to be able to do the pre-learning, the post-learning, the just following through on that information and have that opportunity. And she was able to succeed and graduate with her bachelor's. Without that support, I'm not sure she would have made it. Yeah. I think that's something we should be thinking about stronger within our own school of how do we provide that more one-on-one instruction when necessary. We do some off tutoring, but if you've ever had to go to if you ever have to go to a different doctor, and then you have to explain your issue again, and then you have to explain to the next one that you see the same thing again, I think it's the same thing with a tutor, that unless you have a consistent person, then you're constantly re-explaining what's happening and you don't nearly get to advance. So I guess those structures and supports I think are key, because we want our kids to be able to take whatever class they want, social studies, and we want them to succeed. It was great to hear the National Merit Scholars tonight speaking about, I like STEM, that's probably where I'm going, but really it was my social studies that did the critical thinking, and it is those liberal arts in that way and that creative piece. Those are important things to play in, so I think we need to play that out more. And this data, I think, starts to provide some of that. Probably my biggest concern when I saw that was low income. When that ranking in general, so I appreciate the extra work that came in and the way that looking at, I think it is very hard to be low income or economically vulnerable in a very affluent community. I think it's a much more, because as a school district, we have our parents can pick up a lot. We still require paying for AP tests, IB tests, SAT, ACT. There is options that we could make a choice at some point and prioritize the capacity at which to provide access across the board. When speaking about alternative testing, we could do the ACT test. pay it for everybody, and then you have capacity in which to have all your students take that. The PSAT we currently do. So there are capacities that we could start to reduce some of that financial piece and provide opportunity. The other, actually, I have to admit, there was one more thing, hands-on learning. So that was the one piece I appreciate hearing about the STEM and trying to build the coding, because that's the other component that's not here, is the opportunities that our students have. Because without a framework to understand what you're doing, so even those hands-on, the FOSS kits and things, without a framework from your past to understand some of those mechanics, because that's what you have done, you don't necessarily pick up on the key things that you need through there. And I'm not sure, so we need to figure out how we build those opportunities more strongly across the board. I was just thinking actually at the annual conference that we just went to in Spokane, I went to Port Townsend, they talked about how they built they were a marine building town. And so they actually built that through K-12 from all hands-on experiences across the board so that every student had a similar experience from a hands-on thing. So apprenticeships, internships, and that's the piece that I'm not seeing here. And I think we just read the donations tonight of the support for all those enrichment activities. That's the piece that I'd like to figure out how we capture more effectively here, because I think that's the other component that drives this. Curriculum is one piece, but I think we can drive it with some other opportunities and pieces for exploration and capacity there. So those are sort of my big things. I do think reasonable progress has been made in that regards with the exceptions that have been put forward, and I think there's more work to be done as we look through those. And I think the strategic planning initiative going forward will help to sort of highlight some of those, of where we want to take those things on. Do you have more to say? Okay.
Sorry, I actually had forgotten to mention that I am highly supportive of the coding initiative. The joy of science in K through 8, I mean, honestly, K through 10, is that it's not as much of a building layer upon layer. It's learning how to do science, learning how to ask questions. And learning to code, the logic involved in that is a very solid piece of the STEM world that's not necessarily part of science. If you code properly, then you pretty much know that your code should work. Some people argue you can prove that it will, but nonetheless. So that's a good one. The other thing that actually, I don't know if we have it, and it's something that informally, my 11th grader tutors someone else's 8th grader in algebra. You know, there's no reason that shouldn't be something that's just sort of systematic, that we've got little clubs for tutoring at the middle school. They're high school students covering their volunteer time. That seems a really reasonable thing, and honestly, they wouldn't have to invent it themselves. I just don't know to what extent they might already exist. So, anyway, that's it.
I think it exists in many places. I don't know if we've ever quantified really systematically what exists, but I think that, and the other thing that comes to mind is summer. What are summer access points as well?
And as Dr. Staben was saying earlier, part of our MTSS efforts are looking at what are those evidence-based practices that really make a difference. So tutoring and peer tutoring are two of those. Our goal is to have kind of a menu of evidence-based interventions that would be applied systematically. So this data right here, for example, a student who's earning below a C would be automatically triggered into tutoring. And so it's not up to chance, or if a parent advocates or goes out, it should just be a more systematic process. So MTSS should help us to build those. And peer tutors would be a similar kind of thing.
Any other questions? Okay, so the next step with this. No, go ahead.
Remind me to ask when we talk about AP tests. I'm still trying to wrap my head around having to take chemistry before you take AP chemistry. That means you have to spend 2 years doing chemistry instead of biology or physics or computer science. And there are a few of those questions that are still rattling around my head as I see, I don't know, maybe it's just culture. I wasn't aware that one could take chemistry and then take AP chemistry. So it seems to be the local standard.
Okay, so with that, the next step on the monitoring report is Director Carlson will write through the key points that have come up in regards to, it does sound like everybody's in agreement that there is reasonable progress with the exceptions with low income being specified, Hispanic, Latino. There's some concerns with special education and the work and those outcomes and with the grade pieces and different things. So he will summarize that much better than I was just able to. And then that will come back for a second read and for approval at the next meeting. So that will be in January, actually. Okay, so thank you very much, appreciate it. So the last item on the non-consent agenda is the approval of the monitoring report and the assertion of progress and exception form for mathematics. Dr. Steven.
Yes, at the November 5th board meeting, the ER2 math report was presented. Following the presentation of the report, the board has identified and documented consensus comments with respect to assertions of progress and exceptions. The board has identified focus and priority areas and presentation comments to provide direction to the superintendent as specified in board policy. And following board discussion, the monitoring report and assertion of progress and exception form for ER2 math is presented for your approval. So our recommendation would be that the board of directors approve the ER2 math monitoring report and assertion of progress and exception form as presented, recognizing that reasonable interpretation is aligned with the ends policy and represents appropriate targets for outcomes. Further, the monitoring report demonstrates while there were not full achievement of the ends policy interpretation, the board believes that the evidence demonstrates reasonable partial achievement towards the ends policy interpretation. All of that said, my interpretation, as I go through these interpretations for the first time this year, is that what these reports do is really provide a thoughtful platform for us to have these discussions in a board meeting where we really do look at what's important for the achievement of our students and that we are accountable for those results. And I think in a high-achieving district like Lake Washington, it's important to have that balance of celebrating the success of our high achievement while continuing to keep our eye on everything that needs to happen for all students to achieve. So I appreciate the comments and the guidance and your feedback as we present these different reports.
Okay, I believe you all had a chance to read the assertion of progress. Any questions? So in summary, go ahead, Director Carlson.
No, I just actually wanted to give you a big public thank you for taking my bullet points and turning them into actual English. So, thank you.
Maybe if you're an English student.
Glad to do so. The key points to sort of take out of the assertion of progress, that's sort of where the board sort of summarized, was the focus and priority moving forward based on that analysis was to really look at increasing the percentage at standard to at least 80% in math to start with. That's sort of a short term, and then getting that to 85 and then moving beyond there. But that was sort of the underlying. And the need to improve the overall outcomes for low-income students at all levels, because in comparison to other districts, there appears to be significant opportunities to improve around that. We saw a similar thing with science this evening. And then early learning is a place to explore what the potential is to make that change, and how do we help improve the outcomes for Washington kids, the assessment, especially for low-income and special education students. And also the other piece the board wanted to make sure that was clear was that the board is broadly supportive of the wraparound support strategies for struggling students, and the need to evaluate that effectiveness in other ways in which to strengthen this to improve the overall outcome. So that work that's going on with MTSS and those pieces is greatly appreciated. So that's sort of the key summary of where that came from. This will also get posted to the website for anybody who might be interested. So with that, I will now entertain a motion to approve the ER2 Mathematics Monitoring Report and Assertion of Progress and Exception Form as presented. Oh, mine's long too. Recognizing that reasonable interpretation is aligned with the ends policy and represents appropriate targets for outcomes. Further, this monitoring report demonstrates while there was not full achievement of the ends policy interpretation, the board believes that the evidence demonstrates reasonable partial achievement towards the ends policy interpretation.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director Sage to approve the ER2 Mathematics Monitoring Report and Assertion of Progress in exception form as presented. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, thank you, that's good. It's good to get that done and move through. As we go through the strategic planning process, I think you can see we can start to adapt these policies as we get that into place too. So thank you for your work with that. And our next item is program reports. So Dr. Statham.
And I would say this is a fitting way to end our reports tonight on academic achievement and the things that we care deeply about, including graduation. So Dr. Holman is going to share a big celebration point with you regarding our graduation rate.
Great, thank you, Dr. Statham. And as the board knows, ER1 is one of the monitoring reports that we provide for you. When we get our final graduation data, we can't wait until our formal ER1 presentation. We have to come to the board early. So our ER1 presentation is in the spring, but we like to bring our graduation results to you as soon as possible with a little bit of disaggregation. It should be noted that in this report, it is just Lake Washington School District data, since the state has not publicly released our comparable district data or the state graduation data. So tonight we're just looking at and celebrating our Lake Washington data. I just want to remind us that ER1 is all about our mission of graduating each and every student and graduating them future ready. That is why we do what we do, and that is what this report is all about. And so with the class of 2018, with our new data displays, I just want to unpack what this cohort is. And so the cohort of the class of 2018 has 1,802 students. 1,671 of those students started with us in 9th grade. 131 students transferred in during their high school experience. During that period of time, we had 57 students drop out of high school, and we have 58 students who are continuing beyond their four years of cohort graduation. When I saw that 57, I thought to myself, I think that's a low number. And so I went back to look at our previous years, and in fact, that is the lowest number on record that I can find. In 2017, we had 67 dropouts. In 2016, 102. 2015, 76. 2014, 97. So not only are we graduating more students, we're also retaining more students in our continuing group, and less students are dropping out. For that, the continuing students, I asked Tim Krieger, who are those students? And so 19 of those students are general education students. They have no other indicators or factors. 23 of them are participating in Transition Academy 1 or 2, and 16 of those students are what I will consider other special education students, either students receiving their transition services at their local high school, or students who would receive resource room support who are continuing at their local high schools to receive their diploma. And that totals up to 1,687 students graduating in the class of 2018. And that totals up to 93.6%. And that is the highest graduation, on-time graduation rate that Lake Washington School District has ever had. And with your, yes, congratulations to all of our schools and all of our teachers, all of our staff. With our discussion around GPAs, I just pulled this data up to share. Students that have a GPA of over 2.0 with their graduation, 95.8% of those students graduate. Students that have a GPA less than 2.0, not surprisingly, 52.2% of those students graduate. When you take I believe a D to a C minus, so 1.49 to 1.99, actually 71% of those students graduated, so 47 of our students graduated with a GPA less than 2.0. So those are things that, while the data is very exciting with our graduation rate, those are things that we want to be able to pay attention to as well, because we know those students are going to enter a post-secondary experience needing remedial services. And so you can see here, while we've had a high graduation rate for many years, you can see the trend line continues to go up. Over the last 5 years, we've increased by over 3%. And last year, we ranked first among our comparable districts. We're excited to see where our 93.6% ranks. The extended graduation rate, so the 5-year graduation rate that we've reported to the board for the class of 2017, 95.5%, also the highest extended graduation rate that we've ever experienced. We are very excited about that number, and you can see there the trend line continues to tilt up. And as the closer we get to 100%, I think the board knows the harder it is to continue to close that gap, but that is the commitment that we've made to our community. I want to talk a little bit about some of the graduation reporting that OSPI has started to do. You remember OSPI updated our formula to really be a cohort-based formula in 2011, implemented in 2012. OSPI now reports on-time graduation rate and 5-, 6-, and 7-year cohort graduation rates. So I have that data to share with you tonight. And the 5, 6, and 7-year, or actually the 6 and 7-year cohort graduation rates were calculated for the first time in 16-17. And so this is our extended graduation rates. And so for the class of 2015, it's the first time we have a 4, 5, 6, and 7-year graduation rates. And you can see there our graduation rate for our class of 2015 is 96.7%. So when you think about the delta between that and our goal of 100%, it's about 3.3% of our students in that class did not graduate. That's very exciting data for us, and we can really start targeting and narrowing in on those 3.3% of students, knowing that many of those students were dropouts, and we want to continue to pay attention to that, reduce those dropouts over time, because we are committed to seeing that goal through and reach 100% of our students graduating. This gives us really quality data.
Dumb question I should know the answer to. Which category are Running Start kids in?
So Running Start kids either graduate with us or they choose to graduate with the college that they attend. That's a choice that they get to make.
But they'd still be in the on-time category?
Okay. Correct.
Thanks.
Okay. When looking at some of our student groups, I think the overall thing I want to communicate here is you're going to see continued progress for every group. With our race ethnicity, while there's still gaps that we're paying attention to, you can see the overall trend for all of our groups is continuing to tilt up. Male, female, you can see over the last 4 or 5 years, we're continuing to close that gap, knowing that our females graduate at a higher rate than our males still. And then looking at a couple of our other student groups. And so ELL, as you talked about earlier, our exited ELL students graduate at a similar rate as our students that have never received ELL services. And you can see here the trend is upwards for our students receiving ELL services at time of graduation. When you look at the 7-year cohort graduation rate for ELL students, it's actually at 95%. Okay, similar trend line here for our students receiving special education services, and the 7-year cohort graduation rate, and for students receiving special education, class of 2015 is 86%. And for our students in the low income category, again, a very positive trend line, and that 7-year cohort graduation rate of 89.1% for our low income students. And so in summary, this data really does show growth overall for all of our groups. We're making progress towards closing achievement gaps in our graduation data, and the 7-year cohort graduation provides additional data regarding our progress towards meeting our mission, and that 96.7% number is very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or follow-up? Nope. All right. Well, that was fabulous. Appreciate the breaking out of the information and giving a lot of good detail in there to sort of answer all the questions before we ask them. So that was greatly appreciated. And congratulations at getting to the graduation rate that we did get to. That is impressive, and that continues to happen. So, all right, sorry, it's been a long night. We're at 9:10. Okay. And that was our program report, correct?
Yes.
All right. So now, Dr. Stephen, do you have a superintendent
I will be
report this
very
evening?
brief. I just feel like it's pretty hard to top that. And what a great celebration. I wish we had the cheers and the crowd here, but hopefully people will take note and cheer for us from a distance. This is our last board meeting of the year of 2018, and it will soon be 2019, and we have a lot going on as we start the new year with some community engagement strategies that will inform our strategic plan update, providing additional levy information, and working to answer any questions and inform people for the specifics of that measure. We also have the legislative session starting, and you've been working hard on those points, but keeping track of the work that's happening there will be part of second semester, as well as some student performances and things that happen at this time of the year. So I just want to encourage everybody to look at that district calendar and see what's going on in our elementary and middle and high schools, wonderful music performances, drama performances, just things this time of the year. It's really fun to get out to schools and see the things that students have been working on in some of their special performances. So as we look at wrapping up the year, not the school year, I think we have a lot to be really, really thankful for, and the support of our community as we keep working to do great things for students. It's a great thing to have our graduation rate reported tonight, as well as noting all of the progress thus far this year in real time as we visit schools and see what students have been accomplishing. So that would conclude my brief report.
I will also be brief. So this is
We're doing the legislative
Yes,
update,
thank
I take it. Excellent.
I'm going to say I didn't get.
I appreciate the efficiency. It was almost efficient.
Yeah, there we are. So the November 2018 elections have now been certified. And the rest of the board, congratulate all of our elected officials at the statewide level. The board has now approved at our last meeting its legislative platform, and we are in the process of scheduling meetings with our elected officials from the 1st, 41st, 45th, and 48th legislative districts. The board will be meeting with our officials, or our representatives, over the next 2 months, month or two, to be advocating for the issues that are important for our students in our community. And we look forward to the good work that our elected officials will do in the upcoming session.
All right. Is there any board follow-up? Any future agenda items, debriefing, board member comments? If I could ask a favor, the young man who was here with sustainability, I'd love to be able to get some of those dates, make sure those get into board brief so that we're aware of sort of that piece. That would be really helpful to have that in case we want to attend. And then as we continue to work with the Dominican, Corky's comments around the housing and affordability for students and that work. I know McKinney-Vento and our social workers do a lot of work with that, as well as the young student man who was here tonight talking about pantry packs, which is also in support of all of that. So it'd be great to just have a little follow-up. Thank you. Any other comments? All right, well, thank you very much. And with that, our next board meeting will be held on January 14th 5 p.m. study session, and the topic will be school start times. That will be in the Sammamish room of the Resource Center. And following that will be the board meeting at 7 o'clock here in the boardroom. And so with that, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, hearing none, meeting is adjourned.